He says, you have these calcifications, and which is totally normal for a lot on a lot of reasons, but it's when they have groupings of calcifications, and that's what he was showing me. He says, you have these groupings of calcifications. That's very concerning. But what's also concerning is you have an associated mass. And he showed me where the mass is. I got on the phone, made an appointment to get the biopsy, and it was going to be about a week and a half down the road. I asked them to share. I got a phone call, and he told me what he was seeing. And he said that, Jamie, he says it is a 95% chance or more that you do have breast cancer.
Hey besties, and welcome to our cozy corner of the podcasting world. It's time for another episode of Share a Latte podcast. Here, extraordinary women gather like friends at a coffee shop, sipping on life's challenges and sharing how they've triumphed over every obstacle. I'm your host, Sukree, your virtual coffee bestie. I'm here to brew up a heartwarming cup of empowerment, one inspiring story at a time. Imagine us nestled up in a cozy cafe, surrounded by the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, all set for a journey that stirs your heart, awakens your mind, and gears you up to tackle any challenge that's thrown your way. In each episode of Share a Latte, remarkable women share their stories about how they've weathered life's storms and emerged wiser, stronger, and more determined. These stories are like a warm embrace for your soul, reminding you that resilience and determination are the secret to success. So grab your favorite brew, get comfy, and get ready to soak in these amazing conversations. You'll discover your own power to turn these tough times into incredible strengths. The Share a Latte podcast sprinkles hope, courage, and the belief that you can not only handle life, but thrive into your day. All right, besties, it's time to embrace those tales of triumphs and get ready for another episode of Share a Latte. Welcome, latte and podcast lovers, to another delightful episode of Share a Latte. I'm your host, Sukree, and I'm here to serve you up a cup of inspiration and conversation as we embark on an exciting journey together. In this coffee-infused episode, we have a truly special guest with us, Jamie Vaughn, a retired school teacher from the heart of Reno, Nevada. Her life has been a beautiful blend of educational passion, love, and heartwarming family connections. But hold on to those coffee mugs, because Jamie's life took a sudden twist when she was diagnosed with breast cancer shortly after her retirement. Her tale of resilience and transformation, along with her mission to support others facing similar challenges, is as heartwarming as the first sip of your morning brew. So whether you're sipping on a latte, a cappuccino, or your favorite coffee concoction, settle into that comfy spot and get ready to be inspired by Jamie's remarkable journey. It's a reminder that much like the perfect cup of coffee, life can surprise us with strength, hope, and purpose. Welcome back, friends. I'm so excited because, as we all know, this month is Breast Cancer Month, and I don't think we understand the importance of early detection. So I have here with me today, Jamie Vaughn. And Jamie, walk us through your journey, because being a breast cancer survivor, that in and of itself is a huge and amazing feat. But this journey was very difficult. So let's start from the beginning. Like, what you had just recently retired.
Yep.
And then like days after your retirement party, you found out your diagnosis.
I did. Thank you, Min. I really appreciate you having me on the show. This is such an honor. And I really, truly believe that the efforts of all of us around the world can really make a difference. And I've really found a sisterhood of all sisterhoods, breast cancer survivors, people who are going through breast cancer right now. And so I just really appreciate your ability and interest in highlighting why this is so important. And yes, I am Jamie Vaughn from Reno, Nevada in the United States. And I have always had the ability to listen to my body. I've always had a really good intuition, and not everybody does. And so sometimes that makes it a little bit more difficult, but I have always gone in to get regular mammograms. I found out at some point that I had dense breast tissue, and most people do. A lot of women do. And I was finally told about it several years ago because I have had 2 lumpectomies that turned out to be benign. And so I've just always had it on my calendar. Make sure you go get your mammogram. And I always got them in October, which is weird because that's my birth month. I'll be 56 years old on Monday. And I just always had it on my birthday. Make sure you call to get your mammogram. And so I always did. And the only year that was pushed off was during COVID, because in October of 2019, I did get my mammogram. But the following October, I was not able to because of COVID. So it got pushed off to June. And I did go in June, got my mammogram. Everything was fine. And this was the year that I was going to start my last year of teaching in our school district. And it was a lot of stress. And I will explain how stress and trauma, I believe in my bones, is what led to me being open to being struck with cancer. But as we all know, teaching these days in the school district is incredibly stressful in our country, at least. And so I was really looking forward to retiring. My husband had retired the year before, or that year that I had gotten my mammogram. And I was all excited. We had all these plans, and I worked my last year of teaching. It was very stressful. I could not wait to get out of there. And around the spring of 2022, I started noticing a couple of things. Like I felt like a lump in my breast, in the lower left breast. And the thing is that I have dense breast tissue. So a lot of us who have dense breast tissue, we have lumpy breasts. And so sometimes
absolutely.
when we're feeling things, we're like, oh, what's that? What's that? And then it turns out to be nothing. This did feel a little bit different. I will say that in hindsight. I also was getting some sort of like pings and or twinges of burning sensations, or like electricity type bing. And I would stop and go, what the heck was that? And then it would go away. And then I'd be like, okay, I need to pay attention to that. So when I retired, I had gotten to the last day of my teaching. I got a ping on my phone saying, hey, it's time to schedule your mammogram. And of course, I immediately picked up the phone. I'll never forget it. I was sitting out front with my husband having a beer because I was so excited about retiring. And I called up the scheduler and said, hey, I just got a message saying I needed to schedule my mammogram. And they said, okay, well, your last mammogram was last year, June 25th or 26th. So we have to wait 1 year and 1 day, because when you go get a mammogram, your insurance will pay for it once a year. So I scheduled it for the 26th. And they said, they always ask, do you feel anything? Do you have any symptoms? Do you feel any lumps or whatever? And I'm like, no. Because I figured in my mind, I was thinking to myself, I guess if they find something, then I'm going into my mammogram in 3 weeks. So whatever. So I just said no. And I hung up the phone, and my lovely, darling husband said, that's not true. You have felt a lump, and you have felt these interesting feelings in your breast. And I looked at him and I said, you're right. So I picked the phone back up and I said, that's not true. Actually, I do feel a lump. And my husband, I always take his hand. Do you feel this? And he did feel it. And so they moved my mammogram up by about 3 weeks.
Wow.
So because of that. So on Saturday, June 4th, I had an enormous retirement party. Like, it was the most amazing party ever. Yay. I was so excited. It was wonderful. It was just so much fun. I look at pictures. It's so weird looking at memories on Facebook now. And my mammogram was set to be for that Tuesday, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th of October. And so I went in, and I had to go to another location because they didn't have an opening at the location I normally go to, which was fine. And I'm sitting there, and anyone who has gotten a mammogram, if you're like me, I always look at the nurse because I get a diagnostics mammogram with an ultrasound. I
Right.
always say, make sure that it's a diagnostics, make sure I'm getting an ultrasound, because I know that it's hard to detect breast cancer with just a normal screening or just a mammogram. So I'm sitting there laying on the bed and I look at the screen, I look at the nurse, I see her expressions, I see what's on the screen, and I knew that she was concerned. I could see that in her face. And so she leaves the room, she comes back and she said, the radiologist would like to see you. When you hear those words, you know that they see something.
Right.
Absolutely 100%. Otherwise,
Of
because
course.
usually they'll say, hey, we'll get back to you. We'll send you a letter in
Yeah.
the mail or whatever.
Yeah. It's
So
not
I
a good
went
sign when
in.
they're calling in big guns.
Nope. And so I went in and I sat down, and there was this cute little Dr. McDonald was his name. And he had these huge screens up, and he was really good at explaining to me what their concerns were. He says, you have these calcifications, and which is totally normal for on a lot of reasons, but it's when they have groupings of calcifications, and that's what he was showing me. He says, you have these groupings of calcifications. That's very concerning. But what's also concerning is you have an associated mass. And he showed me where the mass is. And I'm like, I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here, but my
Yes.
podcast is explicit. So I mark it as explicit because you never know, you might drop an F-bomb. But really in my head, I was like, oh my God. So at that time, before, when they were asking, do you want to share these results with anyone? I said, no. When he told me that, I said, I want to change my mind. I want to share these results with another radiologist who happens to be a personal friend of ours, who happened to be at my retirement party a few days prior. And he works over at the breast center that I normally go to. Because he said, we need to do a biopsy. So the nurse took me into this other room. I got on the phone, made an appointment to get the biopsy, and it was going to be about a week and a half down the road. I asked them to share the results, and I called Bruce. His name is Bruce. I call him Bruce. I called him and I said, hey, I have this mammogram that they're saying they see something suspicious on there, and I'm wondering if you'll take a look at them. He said, absolutely, 100%. When I get off work tonight, I will look at them and I will call you immediately. So he did. And I got in the car. I called my husband and told him what was happening. And that night we were supposed to go to a concert, and we did. We still went to the concert. It was an outdoor concert with my dad and a couple of friends of mine and my husband. And so we were there, and my husband was in a really bizarre mood, like really weird. Like he was not being nice and he was just triggered. So I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or not, but we were standing in line at the concert to get in, and I got a phone call from Bruce, and I went out to the grassy area and got on the phone, and he told me what he was seeing. And he said that, Jamie, he says it is a 95% chance or more that you do have breast cancer. And it was, when you hear those words, it's very difficult. It's surreal. So I went back to the line, told everybody, and I just proceeded to try to have a good time at the concert. I saw a few friends of mine, which was really nice, but it was very stressful. And my radiologist, was able, and I call myself very privileged because this is not something that happens with everyone. My radiologist, but if you know the right people, if you know the right questions, the right people who to call, it is possible to get things done. But he moved my biopsy up to that Friday. So we were talking a few days later. So I went in to get the biopsy. I did not take my husband. I did not want to take him. I took one of my really good friends who is a breast cancer survivor. And I had this biopsy, and it was the most horrific experience. It was very painful, and it was insane. Later on, I took pictures of my breast because it was so bruised just because of that biopsy.
Did they not put
And
you to sleep?
no, nope,
It was just a
no.
numbing agent?
Yes, and it did not know. It was so painful, man. I can't even tell you. I was so mad. But
Oh.
I told him, I called the radiologist. Apparently that person's not even there anymore, the person who did the biopsy. I don't know if this is normal. I have no idea. But I called Bruce and I told him, okay, it's done. And he says, okay, do you want to know in 24 hours? Because I was going camping that day. Do you want to know in 24 hours or do you want me to wait until Monday? And I said, I want to know in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So we went camping with some friends of ours and we went paddleboarding, had a great time. And we were sitting out by the lake at our campers and I got the phone call from Bruce. And he is the one who broke the news to me that it in fact was breast cancer and that it was like 5 centimeter tumor. And I know. And it was aggressive. So my cancer was HER2 positive, estrogen and progesterone negative, and it was stage 2. And they staged it at 2 at that point because they didn't have really any indication that it had gone to the lymph nodes. So what I did learn is that when it's stage 3, that means that it has made it to the lymph nodes. So just for people out there who it's super complex, there's so many different avenues that and to look at, but I knew that they said that it was stage 2 theoretically at that time. Oh boy. And then I was in for quite a journey, and I'm talking mind, body, and soul. My mind was really messed up.
Yeah.
I was very frightened. I was mad. I was just petrified and blown away because I was like, how is it that I went to my mammogram last year and everything was fine, and now I have this 5 centimeter tumor? So that was the story leading up to my breast cancer. And I was a very busy person before breast cancer. And I try to really be careful now that I am a survivor and I am no longer cancer. I no longer have cancer, but so that's my story.
You said it during your story that you believe that trauma and work stress all contributed to your diagnosis. Can you dive deeper into that for us? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Because let's be real here, ladies. Let's all know that everybody has stress, but I think some of us are working on a constant state of burnout and trauma that we just ignore.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I came out with it, so I'm a very open person. So I came out with it to all of my friends and family on Facebook. Like I know, like I process things way better if I am out there and talking about it and writing about it and all the things. So I came out and did that. Now, we all know that, or at least I know now, that when you open it up to the public, you're in for a little bit of scrutiny. And my surgeon here told me you really have to filter those things. I had people actually say, oh my God, but Jamie, you're so healthy. You were so healthy. And that really threw me for a loop because I was healthy. I am healthy. And I found out that guess what? Healthy people can get cancer too. Like I was in the best shape of my life. I had actually just lost some weight because I had some COVID weight, and I had just lost some weight and I was feeling the best I had ever felt. Like my hair was long and blonde and super healthy. My face was healthy. My body was healthy. I felt good. I had lots of energy. And so I was really healthy. I was eating really well. And so it really confused me. And as I went through my treatments and my learning and understanding of cancer, I realized that a lot of people have some real misunderstandings about cancer. And one of the ways that I was able to come to that understanding is because right before my treatment started in July, I was in a really terrible, deep, dark place, like a different dimension. And I was sleeping one night or trying to, and I was just really petrified that I was going to stay in this deep, dark state of mind, suspended there. And I knew that I really needed to change the narrative of how everything was going to go down because I couldn't stay there. If I were to stay there, I probably wouldn't be here today. So I reached out to figure out what kind of support I could get. And so I started in the middle of the night, was looking through the internet on Facebook, and I ran across a therapist named Eddie Enever, and he is from Australia, and he is a 3-time cancer survivor. And he had all of these great materials of how we can get ourselves through cancer and remain cancer free. So I was listening to some of his videos and reading some of his materials. And I reached out to him that night. I sent him a private message and said, "Hey, my name is Jamie Vaughn. I was diagnosed with breast cancer just last month, and I'm going into treatment, and I am really struggling here. And I want to see how your services might be able to help me." He got back to me pretty quickly and said, "Absolutely, let's have a consultation. Let's talk. Meanwhile, here are some ebooks that you should read." And so I did. And that just started me on a journey of the possibilities, how I could get through this. And we actually got on Zoom a couple of times, and I was so thrilled that, and at that time, I didn't know how thrilled I would be. I'm so thrilled now because he really did it's like he took that hand and drug me out of the darkness. Right. And I've interviewed him on my podcast, Test Those Breasts, and told him as much. You really saved my life. And so very interesting episode too. But he really taught me a lot about what I should be eating, what kind of supplements I can and cannot take, what I could do to make my treatments better and more effective, more efficacy. And so that was really helpful. He is the one who primarily taught me that stress and trauma, and we in the United States especially, we are in the business of busyness. Yes. He says, you all relate your success to how busy you are. And I said, that is so true. That is so true. It's a cultural, I want to get rid of that. Yeah. and as women, we are multitaskers. Yep. There's so many things that we do at any given time, and we don't give ourselves a break. And so he told me that the reason he kept getting cancer, he believes, is because he wasn't taking care of this. He was really focused on the physical piece of having cancer and the treatments and all that stuff. And he wasn't focusing on his mental and emotional well-being. Right. And that is where he got into like Reiki and meditation and doing whatever he could to take care of his mind and his nervous system. Ooh. And that's a big deal, everyone. Yeah. Taking care of your mind and your nervous system, because that is seriously half the battle. And so I started really thinking about all the things that I used to do. And when I started my podcast, my friend John from Canada interviewed me, and we talked about who I was before cancer, because he really wanted me to get my audience to know who I was and what I became. And who I was. Man, I've been working since I was 12 years old, starting with babysitting. I got my very first job, like real job, at McDonald's when I was 14 years old. And I literally have never been without a job since. And in fact, I've had 2 and 3 jobs at a lot of given times. 2 jobs my whole entire career, my whole entire adulthood. I've had at least 2 jobs. And a business on the side, because you need more to do. Of course. And I've always been a lifelong learner. So I'm constantly taking courses, doing whatever. I've got a family. We have 3 beautiful children. They're my stepchildren. They're all grown and out of the house now. Just a lot going on. And then about 4 years ago, October 6th, the matriarch of my family died, my mother. And let me tell you, that rocked my world like no one's business. And you don't really know how that affects you until it happens. And it was just very difficult. And that kind of led into a sort of a different relationship with my dad. And I struggled through some things, especially when he started dating someone very early on. And that was very difficult. So I'm trying to grieve my way through and pay attention to what's going on with my dad, because I was trying to take care of him. I'm the only girl in the family. So I'm the I don't know, I guess the nurturer. And so I get that. I know from my mom was a nurturer, such a wonderful nurturer. And so to go through breast cancer without your mom is really difficult. So I was carrying his grief and my grief. And then a COVID hits. Okay. COVID hits. My dad, and this was like, what, October, 5-6 months after my mom died. And so that loneliness, right? My dad is courting this woman who didn't live with us, or not live with us. That's not what I meant. Didn't live here in our town. She lived somewhere else. So it was really hard for him to be away from her. And so I was spending a lot of time with him and talking him through and things like that. And I think that I put my grieving more on the shelf a little bit to make sure that I was there for him. And so that happened. And then right during the very beginning of COVID, one of my very dear friends that I had known for many years dumped our friendship.
Wow.
That blew me away. Like, I was grieving my mother. The pandemic just hit. And she decides to walk away from our friendship. And I didn't find out until later about potentially why that was, but I know that it had something to do with politics. So you remember during that time, all of the craziness, and people are dividing, families are dividing, friendships are dividing.
It had your country divided.
Yeah,
Homes,
and it still does.
Yeah.
Yeah, to this day, it's very divided. It's very difficult to go through that. But to have your friend like that dump your friendship, and with no explanation, like I have not seen her or spoken to her since. Every once in a while, we've sent each other little messages. But eventually, I actually got through that, and I'm okay. Like it was meant to be. Like, I don't need to be friends with her. And there were a lot of things that happened that it's fine. I'm okay. Like, I'm completely over that. But it was really stressful. So then the following year, I taught online all year long because of COVID.
Right.
And actually that helped me a lot, because I was able to spend time at home with my dogs and teach 6th, 7th, and 8th graders online. And it was actually really a good experience for me. Meanwhile, all the other stuff was going on, like the insurrection happened, and all this stuff, right?
So much.
And my husband was working at his local school. He's a teacher too. He was working which was potentially the year before he was going to retire, but he ended up retiring that year, at the end of that year, because we had something happen that was tragic at a school. And one of our friends. And so he came home and I said, you need to retire this year, because he had nothing but stress with administration. It was terrible. He would come home pissed off all the time. Of course, that was stressful to me. So he retires. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach one more year. So I did. And I had another podcast going on. I was building an education consulting coaching business called Coach to Engage. Was starting a podcast, Be That Teacher, so that I could support teachers in my retirement. And so I had all these things going on. And then I go through the school year. And then I was struck with cancer. When I say stress and trauma, and I forgot to add 2 more really super important things. Christmas of 2020, we lost my husband's stepfather, who we were very close to COVID. Right. He was in the hospital. We couldn't even see him.
Oh, so you couldn't even say your goodbyes?
No. So that even added fuel to the fire.
Of course.
Less than 1 year later, October 10th, 2021, his biological father passed away. We were also very close to. So we lost three major family members during all that time. So when I say stress and trauma, I feel it in my bones 100%. That is what made me sick and open to cancer striking my breast. We all have cancer cells. We all do. And Eddie Enever says it's the perfect storm that is created.
Yeah. Before we dive too deep into how you felt during that diagnosis, because you touched a little bit on it, but you had mentioned something, the difference between a diagnostic mammogram and a regular mammogram. Can you explain to us what the difference might be and why we should be asking for the diagnostic mammogram?
Diagnostics is usually something like when you go in to get your mammogram, they go in and they smash your boob and then that's usually what they do. And that's a screening type thing. Diagnostics, they can do 3D mammograms, and then they also do ultrasound. So as many pieces that you can get to see if they can detect something is what you need. A lot of people think that if you just go in to get a mammogram, like a smash and not get the ultrasound, we need to know that those two go together. They both see different things. And so they're just using different tools for different angles so they can see different things deeper.
Right.
And so when you just go in for a screening and you have dense breast tissue, it's very difficult for them to see these little tiny calcifications or whatever's in there. So as many views as you can get, deep views, the better. It's always good to get both a mammogram and an ultrasound.
Right.
It's really good to get it if your local docs have the 3D mammogram type equipment, and not all places have what they need to do those, but you need to find it. We need to figure it out and find it so that you can get what you need to be able to detect that. Because as my podcast, Test Those Breasts, it's all about early detection. So in retrospect, even though mine was stage 2, in retrospect, I caught it earlier than what it could have been. Had I not had the ultrasound, it could have been into 3 and 4.
Right. Wow.
And by that time, it's curable. You can it's doable, but it just makes it a lot more difficult.
Of course. Wow.
So knowing, number one, whether you have dense breast tissue, and it doesn't even matter. It matters even if you don't have dense breast tissue. You should be able to get the mammograms that you deserve to have, because 1 in 8 women get breast cancer. That's a big number, like 1 in 8 women.
Wow. 1 in 8 women.
So one time, one of my friends told me before I was diagnosed, she said that her doctor said, it's not a matter of if you're going to get breast cancer. It's a matter of when. And so the longer you live. So being able to detect it as early as possible. So one of my really good friends, she and another girlfriend had stage 1. And so they were able to get through their breast cancer without chemo, and they had radiation and some breast surgery. So depending on the kind of breast cancer you have will determine the different options you have for treatment. They're not all created equal.
No.
So in retrospect, mine was detected early because I found out within that year at least. Had I waited, that would have been a totally different story. But as it was, I had to go through chemotherapy. I lost all my hair. I went through all of the grief of that. I had to get a double mastectomy. I actually had to get a single mastectomy, but I ended up doing bilateral and immediate reconstruction using the deep flap surgery, which is the use of your tissue.
True. When you had, on the day that you had your diagnosis, so take us back to that day, the moment you received that diagnosis, what was that like? I know that you cried about it, but how were you angry? Did you scream
Yeah.
at the sky?
No, I was pretty calm. We were sitting out by the lake with some friends and we knew that we were waiting for the phone call. And no, I was actually fairly calm because I already essentially knew,
Wow.
because the Tuesday before, my radiologist friend said, this is a 95% chance or more that it is breast
Hmm.
cancer. So I already knew. And
Right.
so I was pretty calm. I picked up the phone and called my brothers and my dad.
Hmm.
And it was really after that that all of the emotions, like anger, I was terrified. I was all the things. I
What was your
had
biggest fear after you found out?
just how I was going to get through this treatment and then losing my. And it's interesting because a lot of people say your hair is like not a big deal, and
Yeah.
you just don't know that kind of stuff until you get there. And in retrospect, it is true. It's just your hair.
Hmm.
But I was really scared of how sick I was going to get. This was my retirement year. I
Yeah.
had plans. I had plans to travel. I had all the plans. And so that summer that I was diagnosed, I was supposed to go to Ireland and Scotland with my whole family. This was totally all planned. All of our kids were going, my brothers were going,
Oh.
my dad and his girlfriend were going. It was a big deal. And our daughter they were all taking a little side trip to Scotland to get married. So we had to cancel that whole entire trip. They went, but my husband and I couldn't go.
Oh.
And so I was pissed off at that. And I was super terrified about when I was going to do chemo. Because when you hear chemo,
Mm.
usually you hear death, right? And so I was scared of how sick I was going to feel, how gross I was going to look, how I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I thought I was going to be able to do. So that was the biggest fear.
Yeah.
And then I ended up taking the hair loss into my own hands, and I did it the way I wanted to do it.
Mm.
So I had some girlfriends come over and we went up to the local barbershop, little place up there, and walked in and said, I'm about to lose my hair and I
Hmm.
need to have this badass haircut. I want shaved right here. I want an A-line because my hair was always had long blonde hair. And so she did. She cut it into this really awesome haircut. And I actually really loved it. And it lasted a week. But I took that upon myself to do that. And then I told my husband, I said, look, when my hair starts even starting to fall out,
Hmm.
that's when you need to shave it.
Yeah.
So we went out of town the weekend. I had my chemo, and 1 week later, it started to fall out pretty
Hmm.
quickly. We went to Taylorsville, or a place in California that we normally go to, some friend's house. I took the clippers with me. And on that Saturday, we sat up on the porch, and our friend Kay cut my hair into a pixie cut. And then my husband shaved it off. And Kay's son, my husband's one of his very best friends, was videoing and taking the pictures of everything.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So then I rocked the shave look. I don't know if you've ever heard of G.I. Jane, but my husband called me G.I. Jamie. And
Oh, cute.
so I wore big sunglasses, big earrings, and just rocked
Played
it as
into it.
much as I
Of
could. Yeah, I really
course.
did. Yeah, I really did. And then it started to patch off.
Hmm.
And then I'm like, gross. And so I would start wearing beanies and turbans and things. So I really got into the fashion as much as I could, lost my eyebrows, lost my eyelashes. And I created a private group on Facebook of people who followed me the whole time. So I would go live and show them my bald head and I showed them all of the things.
Hmm.
I showed them all of the breakout on my chest and my face after chemo. It was just I basically showed them the good, the bad, the ugly. And boy, I did feel sick. I was so mad. I was sick. I was like practically drooling when I had just gotten treatment. But my husband and I always had a plan. So I had a 3-week window.
Mm-hmm.
I would have my chemo, take all the meds, do what I could to eat, all the things. The second week, I started to feel better. The third week is when I was feeling most normal. So
Right.
we capitalized on that third week. We went camping every time and went to new places, and I allowed
Oh,
Mother Nature to take care of my mental health, and we just really did some fun things
that's
on that third. Yeah, yeah.
amazing. Let's talk about early detection for a second, because I think young women, we tend to feel a little invincible. But Jamie, tell us about, like, first, when did you first find out that you had dense breast tissue? And then, because a lot of the times what happens is that you really should have an early mammogram to know that you have dense breast tissue so that you're feeling for something different, right? When did you
Yeah.
find that out?
So I found that out in the last, I would say 10 years, maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
I went in to get a mammogram, and they found the lump, and they did a lumpectomy. And I think it was around that first time that they found that lump
Mm-hmm.
that they started to tell me something about dense breast tissue. I didn't really know enough about what that really meant. And of course, I understand it completely now, but I would say it was in my 40s.
Okay. Yeah.
And you don't just develop dense breast tissue
No.
all of a sudden. You have,
Yeah. This is something. Yeah.
yeah. And I think maybe it's over time or whatever. Maybe it gets denser. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about that. But we always say, oh, every October, make sure that you remember to do no, you need to do this not just every October. You need to do it at least once a month. And you want it. And I actually talked to a breast cancer coach yesterday. She's amazing. And she said, a lot of people are afraid to do
Yes. The early detection
examinations on
signs.
themselves.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
self-examinations, which you really
Because,
shouldn't be afraid to do it.
right,
Like,
you
you need to know
shouldn't
your
be.
body, ladies. So feel
Well,
them up.
yeah. And thank you for saying that, because this gal that I was speaking to yesterday said, if somebody else can do it, like when you go into your gynecologist or when you're getting your mammogram, whatever it is, but your body,
Yeah.
better than anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
better than your husband, better than your boyfriend, better than your girlfriend, better than anyone.
Yep.
So you're the one that really needs to pay attention to abnormalities.
Yes.
So she said, usually when you're going around and you're feeling around, if you feel, say, something like right here that feels like a lump, and you're like, stop, breathe, do the other side, feel around in the same area that you felt this one.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something similar there? Making sure that you are doing it in the shower. And I will admit, I was not really all that great at doing self-examinations. I, I would do it, but I just wouldn't do it all the time. I get
How
it.
often were you doing it?
I don't know.
Like
Not
maybe every
often,
6 months?
maybe.
Oh, okay.
And of course, when you go into the gynecologist, they do it.
Of course.
And then
Mm-hmm.
when you go to you get your mammogram. So I wasn't doing it a lot. And luckily, I remember that spring I was feeling down. Because I felt kind of some twinges down there. So I started feeling down
Mm-hmm.
there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I did feel that lump.
Wow.
And so I know people who say, yeah, I never do those. I figure my mammogram. And that's probably what my thought process was too. But I actually have also heard of people saying, yeah, I'm not going to get breast cancer. I live here in Berkeley. Somewhere where everything is GMO free and the environment is great. People
Yes.
actually saying, I don't ever go get mammograms. I'm not going to get breast cancer. I live in a, type of place where everything's organic. And it's like, okay, seriously,
That's not how
that's not
necessarily,
how
that
it
may be a
works.
contribution, but it doesn't necessarily stop.
Exactly. Exactly. So anyway, I do believe that early detection, making sure that you're very familiar with your body, and if you feel anything that's abnormal, don't feel bad about calling your doctor and saying, hey, I feel something and I'm really concerned about it. I really would like somebody to be able to check it out. Go get it checked out. Now, every October, in a lot of places, there are mammogram places where people can get mammograms for free.
Ooh.
It's always important to ask what kind of equipment they have. What kind of mammogram is it? Is it just a screening? Is it a mammogram and an ultrasound? Is it a 3D? What are we looking at here? Take advantage of those. Make sure that you are reaching out and finding out what people have in your area, and go get your mammogram. And also feel your breasts. And yeah, so early detection is just so important.
So you found out you had dense breast tissues at 40.
Yeah, I would say it was probably around 40, maybe 45.
When was your next mammogram after that?
A year later.
Okay.
I always got them every single year.
Every year since basically you were 40.
Yeah, I would say probably maybe even after 40. I don't remember. I'd have to look back on my records, but I do know that they used to tell people, oh, you have to get them at 50. And then they moved it to 40. So when you talk about young women getting it, I know quite a few women who have gotten breast cancer in their early 30s. I actually know of a couple who have gotten it in their 20s. So again, I understand that whole feeling invincible. That was me. Come on.
That's the last thing you think about. Yeah,
exactly. So my mission is to, with my podcast anyway, is to make sure that people have an understanding of what to look for and what kind of surgical options you have, what kind of surgery you should get, and what might be best for your body. And really trying to reach out to as many professionals as possible who understand how to help people get the proper treatment and have them understand their options, even if it's not available in their area.
Yeah.
But young people, yes, women out there and men, all
of
right?
Course.
Men can get breast cancer. We cannot forget the men.
No.
And it's not, so also when you turn 50, apparently you're supposed to get colonoscopies. I'm seeing younger people with colon cancer, colorectal cancers. So we have to really be advocates for ourselves and make sure that we get the testing done that we need to get, especially if we feel something.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was just about to ask you, because you're in the States. I'm up here in Canada. They have just pushed back the mammogram age to 50 up in Canada. So if you aren't feeling something, ladies, like, your doctor will not request a mammogram unless you say something. So being an advocate for your own health means you having to speak up. So if you want that early detection, if you want to know if you have dense breast tissue, you want to get the early detection. But the reality here is that your doctor won't do it unless you're advocating for yourself.
And don't feel afraid about that.
No.
Do not, because I had to advocate for myself several times during my whole journey. And at some point, sometimes I felt like a real jerk, maybe in my head, but in my heart, I'm like, no, this is something that I get to ask. I get to ask these questions. Look, we used to have a system, a medical system where it's like a patriarchal type system. And I don't know what you guys have there.
No, it's very similar. Don't worry.
Yeah, you go to the doctor, they do some checkups, they do some whatever, and then, oh, this is what's happening. We're going to do this and this. And you're like, okay, doctor, whatever. All right. And best. I'm here to tell you that is not how it should be. This is your body. It should be a shared decision-making all the way, all the time. You should have the questions ready to ask your doctors. You absolutely should be a part of the decision making. And if you go to your doctor and say, hey, I'm going to go get a second opinion, and they poo that, you need to get up, turn around, and walk out that door.
Yeah.
Because that doctor is not there to work with you.
No.
And I might ruffle some feathers out there talking about that, but in the end, this is your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really love when doctors actually say, hey, you know what? Maybe you should go get a second opinion. And in fact, I encourage a second opinion. Why
Right.
does that matter? Because if that doctor is open to you getting a second opinion and actually, in some cases, convinces you to go get a second opinion,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's the same answer that doctor gave you, it gives you better peace of mind. The doctor wants you to have a good peace of mind. You
Exactly.
want to have a good peace of mind, and you want to feel and know that you are part of that decision making.
Absolutely. For sure. For
So if
sure.
you go into your doctor and they say, no, you can't because you are 36 years old,
Mm-hmm.
no, find out a way, especially if you are finding something, if you're feeling something, you need to find a way to get a doctor to approve a mammogram
Mm-hmm.
somehow.
Absolutely. Can you tell us, and I'm looking for more of a timeline as well here, but because we've jumped around so much, but what was the exact date of your diagnosis? And then when were you done your full treatments and were in remission?
So I started my treatments I was diagnosed on June 11, 2022 at
Mm-hmm.
3:30 in the afternoon, Pacific Standard Time at
Oh, so you're like
Prosser
a
Lake.
fresh remission.
Yep. And I started chemo. I got my port put in. I actually just got my port removed on October 6th, just last Friday.
Congrats.
Thank you. It was a big step. I got my port put in on June 30th, 2022, started my treatment July 18th, 2022, went through 5 rounds of chemo. I was supposed to go through 6, but they stopped it because I had developed this anemia that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know why. I know with chemo, it does tend to do things like that, throw you into an anemia type state. But it was so low. Excuse me. I had been sent to ER. I'd had blood transfusions and all this stuff. And one thing I did not point out is when I was getting all my scans that summer, they also detected a fairly large tumor, a thymoma tumor in my mediastinum, in my thoracic cavity leaning up against my heart. And
Ooh.
I'm like, what? And it turns out I've likely been walking around with that tumor for quite some time. They did a biopsy on it. It was benign. It was encapsulated. So we
Mm-hmm.
knew that after I had my breast surgery that I would have to get that removed. Fast forward, October 17th was my very last chemo treatment, which was the day after my 55th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I went to my breast surgeon and she told me that I needed to definitely get rid of my left breast. And of course, that threw me into another dark space because I was going to mourn my breast. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I love my breasts. It's just
Hey, preaching to the
most women
choir.
do.
Yep.
And a lot of people say, oh, no, but you get new boobs and stuff like that. Okay, look,
Have
this
you
is not
felt what they feel like? They're not so
yeah,
nice.
this is not
Also,
a boob job.
and this is the other thing is that from a girl who's looked into breast augmentation, especially for after having children, those silicone things are not meant for your body. And there's a lot of women, if you research it, a lot of women get sick from breast augmentations and the silicone that you replace yourself with. So I think when you're already dealing with issues in that area, it just makes you a little more scared about putting a foreign object back into the area.
And it's a very controversial
Yes.
topic because I know that in some areas when you go get a mastectomy and reconstruction, implants are the only option. That
Yes.
is my situation here. That was the only option. And I literally have nothing against anyone who goes and gets breast augmentation, has
No,
implants and things
same.
like that. Everybody gets to do what they want to do with their body, regardless of whether they had cancer or not. So
Amen.
anybody gets to do that. I personally just did not want that. And I've never wanted a boob job, right?
Especially not in
Um,
that way.
no, and I actually had a few people make comments like, "Oh, especially men. Oh, you get to go get your 20-year-old boobies." And I'm like, "Look, I don't want that. That's not something I want. This isn't a boob job. This isn't something that I'm making a conscious decision to go do because I want a boob job. Come on. So anyway, when I was sitting there, now let me just back up a little bit, because sometimes things happen that I call kismet. So back in the summertime, after I found out I had breast cancer, I had a friend of mine reach out to me and saying, hey, our mutual friend actually had implants. She had breast cancer. She had implants. She had nothing but problems with them and went to this place in New Orleans at the Center for Restorative Breast Surgery. It's a world-renowned breast center surgery hospital, right? And she says, maybe you should talk to her. And at that time, my mind just wasn't there yet. But I did reach out to her. She sent me the website. I never really looked into it. So then after I found out I had to have this mastectomy in October, I think it was late October that I went in to see my surgeon. I went on my Facebook group and said, oh my God, I have to get this breast surgery. And I think it was actually before that I found out that I had to have breast surgery before I went to go see my surgeon. I had two other friends reach out to me, two separate other friends reach out to me and say, hey, I know that my sister-in-law or my sister's best friend, two different people, went to this place and had this surgery where they use the tissue from your body to reconstruct the breasts. You should look into it. And if you want her phone number, let me know. So I did get their phone numbers. And when I went to see my surgeon, I did ask about it. She said she didn't know anything about that kind of surgery and that she was concerned about what kind of care I would get when I came back to Reno. So at that time I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then I had 3-hour conversations with all three of these women who told me what their experience was. And I was like, okay, I'm calling this place. So I called, I made an appointment. I had a consultation, went rounds with my husband about it because my husband was like, what do you mean you're going to go somewhere else to do that? You have a doctor's team here in Reno and you're just going to dump your doctors here? And I'm like, I'm not dumping anyone. I said, I'm looking into other options for my body. This is not your body. This is my body. And I'm not going to go to a back alley butcher just to get my breast and not know anything and get my breast chopped off. I've been doing research. I talked to this hospital. I've been talking to all these other people. He finally came around and I ended up canceling my surgery here in Reno, because if I was to do it here in Reno with my surgeon, I would either had to have stayed flat or went and got implants right then and there. And that's not what I wanted. So instead, I made an appointment to go to New Orleans. My insurance, it was good in New Orleans, but it was out of pocket. So I did have to pay money to do it. And I had my mastectomy and immediate deep flap reconstruction. And the deep flap is where they do take the tissue from your abdomen area and they immediately reconstruct your breasts. They create mounds. And so my breasts now have my same skin, my skin, my tissue from my own body, and my own veins. They connect all of the veins into the breast. So my breasts were kept the same size and they feel really good. I'm 10 months out. I feel my boobs all the time. I'm 10 months out. And I actually am going in to get my second phase this coming December. So the first phase is they want to make sure the flaps and everything survives from the donor site, which they have. Then the second phase is where the revision comes into play. That is where I get the same surgeon, and I interviewed him on my podcast. So if anybody wants to listen to that episode, it's Dr. Cabling. And I want to say, is it episode 18? I think, but his name is Dr. Cabling from Center for Restorative Breast Surgery. He did an amazing job with that first phase. So if I could never get the second phase ever again, I would be okay. I would be okay. But the second one, he's going to assess the situation. He will figure out where it needs to be filled in, lifted, moved to make them more symmetrical. And that will hopefully be my last. I think that will be my last one. I was a super cut and dry type case. There are some people who come in there to get explanted.
Right.
Because they've had nothing but problems with their implants.
Mm-hmm.
And then they figure out where they can take tissue from their body and then reconstruct.
Right. Oh,
so you asked, when was I cancer free? So December 20 was my 1 week post-op in New Orleans. I was still there.
Mm-hmm.
I went to my 1 week post-op December 20th. And that is where Dr. Wright and Dr. Cabling told me that they took 3 lymph nodes from my left side and 1 from the other. Everything was clear. All the margins were clear. You are cancer-free, Jamie. So that second phase that I'm going into this year is the 1 year anniversary of when I found out I was cancer-free.
Oh, that's so amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. That. And now my hair is growing back, and I think I'm going to keep it short.
I didn't know what it was like before, but I love it short.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually, I say that I bloomed my mother. My mother had short hair all the time. And so I bloomed my mother. It's the same, her same color and everything. Like my color this is way darker than I've always been.
Love it. So how's your life perspective now that you've become a breast cancer survivor?
Different.
Yeah.
Different. Yeah. So 5 weeks after my breast surgery, I had to get that thymoma tumor removed. Mm-hmm. We found out that thymoma tumor was causing this anemia, and it's not an iron deficiency. What it is, when thymoma tumors, 1 in 400 people, 1 in 400, I think, get a thymoma tumor. And they usually start developing when you're young, like you're born with a thymus gland. And that's what keeps us alive. It puts off antibodies to help keeps us alive. So if you're born without a thymus gland, you're probably not going to live past a couple of weeks. But you're born with a thymus gland. As you grow older, it shrinks and then essentially goes away. Mine grew a thymoma tumor in it. And so what that was doing is the antibodies that were being produced by that thymoma tumor, they were attacking my red blood cells. So my bone marrow was not producing red blood cells fast enough before those antibodies were attacking and killing them. So my hemoglobin level was super, super low on a constant, in that I'd have to go in and get blood transfusion. So this was going on for quite some time. When they moved the thymoma tumor, it didn't seem to turn around. So I had to go to a specialist. I got a second opinion and all that. They put me on a prednisone and cyclosporin. So the prednisone was to fire up the bone marrow. The cyclosporin was to attack the antibodies that were attacking my blood cells. So I'm an immunocompromised patient right now because I'm still on the cyclosporin, not the prednisone. So it's been keeping my hemoglobin at more of a normal rate. So I haven't had a blood transfusion since last April. That has been one big part of a change, but also mentally and emotionally. I will say that I've got some PTSD. Last February, I really was struggling, and my husband and I were struggling in our marriage because everybody always thinks that when you get past cancer, you're cancer-free, that everything just goes back to normal, and it just doesn't work that way.
No.
In February, I was really struggling, and my husband and I started going to therapy, and it occurred to me finally that the reason I was struggling is because I didn't have any purpose. Like I didn't feel like I had any significance, no purpose whatsoever. Before cancer, I was doing so much and I was making a difference and I was doing all these things, right? And then cancer hits and boom, everything, I wasn't working, I wasn't nothing. And so I was feeling very not okay with my world. And so that is where my podcast was born. I felt like I wanted to be able to help shorten the learning curve for other future breast cancer patients, because I learned so much just because I was thrown into so much, and I'm still learning stuff, that I want to be able to be a part of the support system for other breast cancer patients. And so I launched my Test Those Breasts podcast on June 11, 2023, the 1 year anniversary of my diagnosis. And I have been releasing, I'm on episode number 22, will release on Sunday. So I release every Sunday at 7 a.m. And I have interviewed doctors like surgeons, oncologists, radiologists, therapists of all different kinds, survivors, people who are advocating at our local cancer support groups, organizations here in our area, just all kinds of people. And I've learned so much. And so I did that as a healing mechanism because I really needed it, because you're in healing sometimes for the rest of your life, honestly. And I know that it's making a difference because I hear people, they reach out to me and tell me, thank you so much. I wanted to be part of the community that is advocating and educating and supporting other breast cancer patients, because we really need that. And I've learned so much that, I don't know, that's why I started that podcast, and just having a lot of fun with it. It's very intriguing, and there's just so much important information because there's so many things that are misunderstood, or people don't even know what's up and what's down. Oh, and then just in the past couple of months, I've really noticed that I'm going through some PTSD, and it's a real thing with breast cancer. We have to be aware of that and how to recognize that. So one of the things is, it's a very important time of month for me with my mom dying. It's my birthday. It's my favorite season. And then, but also you're starting to see memories pop up on Facebook. So you're starting to see when you were diagnosed, when you were losing your hair, what things were happening last year. So I am in some deep therapy about it. I'm trying to take care of it. And so, yeah. And a lot of people don't understand that, because they say PTSD is for people that were in war and things like that. There's a such thing as PTSD and trauma in other situations.
Yes, absolutely. I am so glad that you've given us so much useful and in the moment techniques and helpful tips to get early detection, being an advocate for our health. And I love that you're raising awareness within your podcast. So why don't you tell, and this will all be in the show notes, guys,
okay,
but where can people find you, and best place to connect with you and listen to your podcast?
So yeah, I'm on all the social media. I'm on LinkedIn under Jamie Allen Vaughn. I am on Instagram under Test Those Breasts. I do have a Facebook page, a private Facebook page, or my own personal one, but I also have a private group that I try to bring in extra content, and it's under Test Those Breasts. And you have to answer some questions and things like that. And I know the link usually expires. I don't know why. I don't know why we can't just put something out there for somebody, but it's under Test Those Breasts. And then I'm on TikTok under Test Those Breasts, and I'm just starting to learn how to use that. And then, yeah, I think that's, and then, yeah. So that, and my email address is testtosebreasts@gmail.com.
Okay. Sounds great. Awesome.
Oh, and then my podcast is on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple, other platforms. And again, I release every Sunday at 7 a.m. And it's just really been helpful. So please come listen.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jamie. One final question before we sign off today. What is your favorite coffee order?
My favorite coffee order? What, from Starbucks or something? Or
anywhere.
Oh, gosh. I usually like things that are not sugary, like a flavored coffee that's not sugary. And I do like iced coffees with like oat milk. Yes. Oh, I'm primarily plant-based, so I try to stay away from dairy products and things like that. So iced coffee with oat milk or almond milk or things like that.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much again, Jamie, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Min. I really appreciate your having me on.
Of course. As this invigorating conversation comes to an end, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to our exceptional guest, Jamie Vaughn. Your journey serves as a powerful reminder that we shall never underestimate the strength and resilience that resides within us, especially when it comes to our health. Jamie, thank you for inspiring us to take our well-being seriously, to speak up when necessary, and to become passionate advocates for our bodies, ensuring that we get the care that we need. To my latte lovers, let Jamie's story be the beacon of hope and motivation. Early detection is not just a phrase, it's a lifeline when it comes to breast cancer survival. So keep sipping on your coffee and let this conversation be a catalyst for taking proactive steps towards your health. Remember, when we take charge of our health, we're not only empowering ourselves, but also fostering the culture of self-care. Until next time, let's all speak up and take care of our most precious possessions, our bodies. If today's episode added a touch of warmth and inspiration to your day, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. By doing so, you won't miss out on any future heartwarming journeys we'll embark on together. And hey, if you enjoyed our flavorful conversations and the embrace of this beautiful podcast, why not take a moment to leave a review? Your thoughts and your feedback mean the world to me, and it might even help others discover the magic of Share a Latte. So whether it's a few words or a heartfelt reflection, your review goes a long way in spreading the joy. Life is like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, a blend of experiences that come together to create something truly remarkable. Just like every bean contributes to unique flavor, every cup in our cup of stories adds a depth of richness to our journey. Until next time, besties, remember you have the power to turn your trials into triumphs and your scars into stars. Keep believing in yourself, keep chasing those dreams, and above all else, keep thriving. This is Min taking her last sip from the Share a Latte podcast, reminding you that life happens and coffee helps.